Just a brief overview of what to expect today. If you are not on mute and you are not a presenter, we would ask that you mute yourselves now. That way we can cut down on background interruptions and feedback problems. Later, when we enter the roundtable session this afternoon or tomorrow morning's Hot Ideas Exchange, we'll ask people to unmute themselves when they are called on to speak or when they have an idea to discuss. If you are participating from your desktop computer, you may want to set your Zoom settings to speaker view so that you can easily see Peter's slides or whoever's speaking at any given moment. In a moment, we'll have the first part of our keynote program followed by a pit stop break around 3:40. We'll resume at 4 p.m. With the general roundtable discussion of issues. I don't know about you, but cocktail hour starts early here these days, so feel free to bring your own beverage then. We should dismiss around 5 o'clock today and resume in the morning at 9 with the Hot Ideas Exchange program moderated by our old friend Dennis Dunn of the Anniston Star in Alabama. Then at 10:15, the second half of our keynote with Peter Wagner. In case you missed some of the conference, all sessions will be recorded and links for playback will be forwarded to registrants after the conference adjourns. And you may have heard me earlier say that Peter's PowerPoint presentation that you're about to see will be made available to you in its entirety. Now I'd like to turn it over to my counterpart in Arkansas, Ashley Wimberly, the Executive Director of Arkansas Press, for a few additional welcome remarks and to introduce our first speaker. Ashley, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Lane. Well, as Lane said, we're sad that we're not there with you in person, but we're glad that we get to spend this time with you this afternoon. And one of the things that we're particularly happy about is that we get to have Peter Wagner back again this year. For those of you who have heard him present in the past, I'm sure that's why you're back here today. And if you haven't, then you're in for a treat this afternoon. And when we talked to Peter about an introduction, he said, you know, we don't need an introduction, just tell them that I hope that they really benefit from this 90-minute session. And that we know that you will. But also would like to say that we are really happy that Alabama and Tennessee joined us this year. I was thinking about the name if we continue to grow. I guess now it's ArkLaMiss Bama 10 Conference. Is that what it is now? But we're really looking forward to this first session with Peter, and it sounds like it's a cheer. 1, 2, 3. Newspaper's future looks good to me, and I know that's something we all need to hear, especially right now. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Peter.
I'm not hearing Peter.
I don't think Peter started speaking yet, but he's on mute.
That may be part of it.
It's not a conference without AV issues. Please bear with us.
Am I unmuted now?
You're unmuted. Take it away.
Okay, well, we got that part taken care of. Do you see anything?
We see your, yeah, let's get rid of that. Now we see your desktop.
Now you see, am I the only one?
We do. We see the full array of slides, Peter. If you go to slideshow, you should be able to start.
All right, well, here we go, folks. I am now seeing something completely different on my screen again, but I am sure glad to be with you. And I think the slide you're seeing is the one that talks about where we are at and why we are doing and what we are doing. The only thing that I see wrong with this entire seminar is that I don't get to have shrimp and grits. And so other than that, I'm glad to be with you, and I'm excited that you've expanded to pick up the other two associations. And we're going to try to talk today about some of the reasons, and more importantly, what we can do about being still a powerful media in our own local community. And so first of all, the point that we're going to look at is the fact that newspapers are not as dead as a lot of people are saying. Publishers, editors, and salespeople, and more importantly, other media seem to think that that we've gone by the wayside. And this particular presentation will examine 3 simple steps to jumpstart yourself and your paper to assure a long and prosperous future for both your publication, but also for your community. And I'd start out with a question, and I know we're all muted, so you can't give me an answer, although I do have points along this seminar where I will let you ask some questions, not at the end, but as we go through it. But I have a question for you. The question is, how is Walmart like a newspaper? And I know that in my particular market, I'm getting some Walmart dollars these days, and many are and many aren't. So it can be either a bad word or a good word. Walmart. Walmart was at one time the most terrible thing that could happen to a community, because when it came to town, it tended to close down a number of local businesses, especially those that had no gumption, or those who were underfinanced. But the fact of the matter is, in most communities now, those towns that are fortunate enough to have been selected by Walmart for a location, because of the Walmart, that store became a magnet to attract other businesses to the town. And the town is in fact now growing and prospering, mainly because of, or for one of the reasons because of, they have a Walmart. But I asked myself, how is Walmart like a newspaper? And I came up with 3 things. It's local, it's logical, and it's lively. And those are the 3 key words of the time we're going to spend together this afternoon. Walmart is local in that they supply the products they sell in that store dependent upon what that particular local market has a desire for. And so you'll find down in your southern states that they carry certain things that we'd never have up here in Iowa and South Dakota. And more likely, we have things up here in Iowa and South Dakota where we have 11-inch drifts of snow that you wouldn't probably have down your way. So number one, I think even though it's a national chain, it has succeeded in growing itself because each market they thought local. And then the second thing is they thought logical. What is it that they need? What are the products, the services, the different items they want to sell that will make their store and that market thrive? And what are the things that they don't need at all because you'd never sell them no matter how long you left them on the shelf? So local, logical, and lively. And lively, I think, in terms of the garden center in the spring and the big Christmas displays they have that are opening up about this time of the year, and all the different ways that they process presenting the store. The grocery division, for example, which is more recent than part of the old hardware division of the store, but these things are all presented in a lively and exciting way. And I think those 3 things also are the secret to whether or not we are successful as newspaper publishers. And there's every reason in the world why we should be. I wanted to throw this slide in. We'll look at this more tomorrow, but these were the 2 covers of 2 16-page sections, 32 pages in all, that we produced in our Northwest Iowa Review 3 weeks ago. And they're called A Day in the Life of Northwest Iowa. And we started out with the idea originally of making them a day in the life in Northwest Iowa during COVID, and then discovered that there's so much going on that really doesn't care whether we have COVID or not, that it didn't make any difference. And as I said, we'll talk about this more in the sales of advertising and advertising ideas tomorrow. But this ended up being 2 32-page broadsheet sections, 50% advertising, exactly 50% advertising. So 16 pages of advertising, 16 pages of pictures. Our local team and a number of volunteers and recruits from outside of our newspaper offices started at 12:01 in the morning, and they shot over 3,000 images between 12:01 in the morning and 12 midnight that same day. And from those 3,000 images, our editor selected 127 of them, which were featured in these 2 pages. And the pages were demonstrative of what one day, just one day in Northwest Iowa might be like. You'll also notice, if you look carefully, see the eyes and the black backgrounds on each of those 2 cover sections. By the way, both sections were entirely printed in color. But if you see those eyes, that's our symbol that this is a keepsake, an Iowa Information, which is a publishing company's name, keepsake, something that you're going to want to put in the drawer and hang on to, because 10 years from now, you're going to want to pull it out and show it to the kids or to the grandkids and say, this is what things were like back in 2020 when we were going through the pandemic. We'll talk a lot more about this and show you some of the examples of some of the inside pages and some of the examples of the advertising when we get into tomorrow's session. As I said, newspapers today have 3 L's to hang themselves on. And if they do that, I think they have every reason and every opportunity to succeed. And those 3 are local, logical, and lively. So let's look first of all at what some of the other people in the past and currently are saying about our industry. Steve Jobs, who is now obviously gone, but I get a giggle out of, he said once, whenever I have time to pick up the printed version of a newspaper, I wish I could do it all the time, but our lives are not like that anymore. And there is some truth to that. We don't have those free times, those relaxing times. When I was growing up, the Argus Leader in Sioux Falls was delivered on the afternoon. And when it came on the afternoon, it came about 4:30, 5 o'clock, you'd see people sitting out on their front doorstep, actually reading their paper and absorbing the day's news. Now papers are delivered in the morning, and half the time we're on our way out the door to go to work when they get there. And so we don't necessarily get a chance even to look at them, but we can grab other bits of news off the radio or the internet or our TV in our office, or wherever it might be. And so we're being outpaced sometimes because of that delivery. But nothing puts everything together as completely and as wonderfully as the local hometown newspaper. I find this one just hilarious. An American poet, Diane Mikulski, says, I don't read the newspapers. I don't watch television. I'm not interested in current events. Then she says, although I will occasionally discuss them if other people want to discuss them. Well, how do you discuss current events if you don't know what's going on around you and are not aware of what's in the newspaper or on television news or wherever it might be? I think she speaks from a dumb mouth. And then finally, again, back to Steve Jobs in The Onion. He said once, and this is so true and so terrible, it's nice to see that the printed word is still, at least for now, the most powerful medium reporting on the death of the printed word. And sometimes I think we are forecasting our own prophecy. To get to the other side, and the good side, the past 6 months, this came across my desk, and it's from Kristen Smith. She's a professor down at Georgia College and University. Look at this carefully with me. Community newspapers are the most relied upon news source in the area they serve. Most relied upon news source in the area they serve. Community leaders believe that their local newspapers, journalists, and owners are community builders, providing relevant, truthful, and local information. So I'm going to give us a chance to open this up for just a second. On the right side of the screen, you'll see a picture of our Hayward Independent. This is one of 5 newspapers that we own now up in Northwest Iowa. This is our smallest paper. We bought it because the people that owned it said, either you buy it or we're just going to close it down. Candidly, it's grown nicely since we've taken it over, and mostly because of the young lady that's down there that believes in it, who was the editor when we bought it, and it's still the editor and now also the salesperson for it, even after we bought it. It's only a 900 circulation paper, but it does have a wonderful presence and a wonderful reflection of the community. And that's going to be the high point of what we talk about all afternoon, the time that I'm with you, is that you need to be a reflection of the community. So now whoever is controlling the mute button, if you want to open it up, and if there's anybody who has any comments or questions so far, let's take those at this point.
Yeah, anybody who wants to jump in, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. You can also type your questions into chat at any point during the program, and I will be happy to relay those to Peter.
Sounds like there's no questions at this time. I hope that they are as we go along, though, because this should be a discussion. Okay, number one, we're going to talk about local. This is Jeff Grant, our editor, and one of the scenes you'll see from our newsroom and our creative department. Jeff wants me to make sure that you understand that local, complete, and balanced. Local, complete, and balanced are the community paper's greatest assets. Unlike electronic media that operates on a limited time schedule and where breaking stories become old news minutes after they happen, community newspapers regularly report all the details as part of an easy to navigate, well-edited, weekly printed package. So the competition that's out there that are constantly bad-mouthing us that we're dying and we're losing out, they aren't even beginning to do the kind of job that we're doing and providing to our community all of the news that they need to have. This seminar today, by the way, is directed more to the community papers than to the metro papers. There's a huge difference at this point in what's being done on the local level and what's happening to so many of the corporate-owned papers in the major markets where they're being competed against by everything you can think of, from handout sheets to local blogs to on and on and on. The paper on the left on this particular slide is our Sioux Center News. We bought that about 3 years ago. The Sioux Center News is about 1,500 circulation. It's in a community that's very into itself, and it does very, very well for us. We also bought with it the local shopper, and truthfully, the shopper is really the one that brings in the greater amount of revenue in that town. But interest in the newspaper continues to grow all the time, and we're thankful about that. We have a marketing director for a group of banks in Northwest Iowa, the Iowa State Bank Group, and they're located, luckily for us, across our 5.5 county or 4.5 county market. And one day I was visiting, talking to her and talking about print advertising and the importance of print advertising. And she said, "You don't have to tell me that. I understand that. I don't and won't advertise in daily newspapers because they're picked up, headline scanned, and put down and done with at that particular moment. But weekly papers or bi-weekly papers," she said, "stay in the house a week or 2 weeks, are referred to often, and are read at different times by different members of the family, and are, for me at least, a very, very good investment." This is part of our creative department, looking from there back towards our newsroom area and the people who are putting together the advertising and the layout and the design of our publication. We have now 13 people in our newsroom and about 11 people in our creative department. We put together one paper, sometimes two papers, every single day of the week. The last one being the Northwest Iowa Review, the founding paper that my wife and I started the business with, which is at 5,400 circulation. The review is, and it covers a 5-county area. That's about 25% of the total homes in that area. Years ago, they used to tell me that if you had 50% of your hometown circulation, then you were pretty much maxed out in the circulation numbers you would expect to have for your town. Now, by circulation, I'm talking population numbers. So we have 5,000 people that live in Sheldon, Iowa, our base community. So we should top out at about 2,500 subscribing households. But because of the regionalization of the paper, we actually reach more like 4,000, 5,400 is the actual number with the county sales. Recently, the University of Northern Iowa came up, and this is just the last 2 weeks, so I mean recently, came up with factors that they believe create newspaper resiliency. Things that keep a newspaper alive in the age that we're in today. And they said, number one, the most important thing is local ownership. Local owners are more responsive to the newspaper's needs and have a stake in the newspaper's community. So they said if the paper is loaned locally, it probably is going to be more likely to succeed and be here around 10 or 15 years from now, because the people that are running it day to day have financial investment, both in it and in the community that it serves. The second thing they said was centrality of journalism to business. The creation of a newspaper, because it is the principal business of the person producing that newspaper, is more important than if it's owned by an investment group that might have a trucking company and a theater company and a newspaper publishing company and a candy company. I'm grabbing names off the top of my head, but when journalism is the core business, a newspaper is more likely to succeed and to be a success. Finally, they said, or not finally, but the third thing they said was that it should be a diversified business, that there are complementary things. So this really goes against everything that we heard it say just a second ago, but it says that there are ways that complementary businesses under the same corporate umbrella can be helpful for revenue, particularly in periods when ad sales are down, but journalism must remain central to the business. I know of a newspaper down in Texas that has a gift shop as part of its operation and does very well with the gift shop. And in fact, people who come in looking for gifts, knickknacks, whatever, quite often end up buying ads or at least buying a subscription to the paper while they're there. And I know another one that has a huge bookstore that they made arrangements with one of the distributing companies to bring in racks and racks and racks of all the popular and hottest selling paperback bestsellers, and they run that as a secondary business in the front end of their store, and they do very, very well with it. We also have businesses that have print shops still, especially in the age of digital printing, or who do ad design or printing creation work for outside businesses, web design. There are all sorts of things that can be done, but when you're done with all of those other things, the newspaper itself should still be the very most important thing that you do. Along that line, the author of the article from you and I said, well, consider the July bankruptcy auction of the McClatchy Group. They were America's second largest newspaper group. It was acquired by the Chatham Asset Management Company, an investment company with holdings in gambling and racetrack business, and a controlling interest in the American Media Group. Now, if you don't know what the American Media Group is, they're the ones that operate the National Enquirer. Many called the auction of the McClatchy the latest step in the gradual dismantling of the industry that used to be controlled by local families with civic roots, and now has largely passed into the hands of bottom line focused private equity managers. We'll also need to consider the paper's commitment to the community. In addition to local ownership, the newspaper itself should be committed to the community through its journalism and through its activities and through those projects in the community that it chooses to support. My son, Jay Wagner, who died in 2009, very, very young at age, but was the editor of our paper for a number of years, told me once, he says, I got to go to coffee. And I said, what? You don't drink coffee? And he explained to me that he always makes it a point to join all the businessmen downtown. At that point, we're meeting at the old Rexall drugstore every morning at 10 o'clock for coffee. And he did so. He said, I don't say much, but I keep my ears open, because he says, I learn a great deal about what really is going on in the community. Sometimes I'll hear breaking news stories before even the newsroom knows about it. And I also get a chance to have people tell me what they like and don't like about the paper. So it's good to get out and be part of the community and to find out what the community really thinks about you and how you can better the community for yourself, your family, and for your readers. By the way, Jay, before he died, wrote a thing called Straight Talk from a Small Town Editor. And in it, he listed a whole group of different ideas that he had for how you can get out into the community or find out what's going on in the community or get good news stories out of the community that you might not otherwise have. And if you want to email me at pww@iowainformation.com, it's at the bottom with a period rather than a comma, pww@iowainformation.com, I'll be glad to email you back a copy of that Straight Talk from a Small Town Editor. Many press associations have published it over the past years, but it's still something to value for those of you who may not have it. I got to go back the right way now. There we go. Finally finishing up this U&I study, which again, I said was just published 2 weeks ago. They said the health of the local economy is also a deciding factor in whether or not a newspaper can succeed. A healthy local base of advertisers is essential for profit news organizations. Reputation and civic service status is also something that needs to be considered. And this would seem to account for much, but in the study, they found out that reputation and institutional status alone are not enough to sustain subscribers and advertisers and must be constantly nurtured. Finally, no competing local media. It's easier to compete a newspaper without competition, which can include other local newspapers, radio stations, or television stations that cover local news, but all newspapers are subject to competition from digital powerhouses such as Google, Facebook, and Amazon, which capture more than 67% of the digital advertising revenue in 2018, those three together. There is a move going on right now. I got a phone call from a U.S. Senator from out east last week wanting my comments and thoughts on the government funding money in for nonprofit status. Many commercial news organizations are struggling, and nonprofits have experienced stability and growth, and there are foundations that will provide funding so nonprofit newspapers can do more journalism and less fundraising. But I also believe in my own heart that when we have nonprofits supporting us financially, we're also taking into the House someone who can attempt to control that which we publish in the newspaper, which I consider needs to be of no side and totally balanced. I have a friend out in Denver, Colorado. His name is Bob Sweeney. And Bob owned a number of newspapers, sold them all off, and 38 years ago moved to Denver and bought this little small regional or suburban paper. And he wrote me back earlier this year. He said, we're adapting to new platforms of providing news online and improving our webpage. But, and here's the but our bread and butter is the lively weekly print newspaper that you can see stacked by your chair, grab a hot or cold beverage and read whatever's happening and about your friends and the community where you live. The presses continue to roll, Bob said, and there is nothing like the smell of ink on newsprint. To be successful, we have to do 4 things. We have to inform the public of what's really happening, from the Junior League baseball team that happened Wednesday night, and where somebody's son hit a home run and drove in 3 people for the win of the game, to the serious discussions going on at City Hall. We have to be entertaining. Many of the feature stories we run, we publish because they're interesting and enjoyable and a light read and something wonderful for the heart and for the mind. Newspapers need to lead and cheerlead. Our newspapers, all of our 5 newspapers, carry strong editorial pages, and all of them have editorial pages to their own local market. No editorial is repeated in any of our newspapers, and we try to tell people what the problems are, but we also try to cheerlead the community into ways that they can have a better life for themselves, their children, and their neighbors. And finally, we have to educate our market about what needs to be done to be a better place to live, to be a better place to do business. And also we have to constantly be educating them as to why we still are alive, viable, and important. Over in the central part of Iowa, a new newspaper was launched this summer. It's called the Southeast Iowa Union. And it was launched as a way to maintain a daily newspaper in 3 different nearby cities when most companies were cutting publishing days from a daily to 2 or 3 issues a week. I have a daily newspaper at the north of me up in Minnesota that at one point was considered one of the leading daily newspapers in Midwest. It was in a town of about 10,000. It enjoyed at the time that I was putting up there 16,000 circulation. And it ran papers all over the place every single day, about into Iowa and all across that area of Minnesota. Came out Monday through Saturday, 6 days a week. It was one of the first papers to put in offset presses, and it was one of the first papers to really push the use of color. It's down now to 1 day a week. It dropped from 6 to 3 to 2 to 1, 1 day a week. And it's dropped from 16,000 circulation down to 2,000 circulation. And the problem, of course, is the people who publish it don't have the passion or the personal commitment or the work ethic of the people who originally built it up to that huge number in the first place. I'm not going to kid anybody. Publishing a newspaper today is hard, but publishing a successful newspaper is very, very satisfying. The Southwest Union retained offices in each of the 3 cities where the weekly or the dailies used to exist: Washington, Iowa, Fairfield, Iowa, and Mount Pleasant, Iowa. So they still have news departments in all 3 of those cities. And they kept all the employees, but they centralized into one location the accounting, the advertising creation, and the page layout and design, and of course the printing. So they're able to give the tri-area a daily newspaper, but they've done it by bringing together the power of 3 one-time dailies and making them into still an existing but very viable and useful daily publication. There are 5 reasons why our newspapers are not necessarily thriving and why sometimes they're considered inconvenient. Number 1, they are delivered by the mailman while the subscriber is away at work. I said earlier about how the afternoon newspaper was delivered to the door about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and people would sit down on their stoops or on their front porch furniture and they'd read the paper and enjoy it. Newspapers today, number 2, have many undesired, unread sections. Once we were able to put together automotive sections and have stories about what's happening in the car dealership industry or in the new car development industry and sell lots and lots of ads. Now, those ads aren't necessarily there, but we still put that section together. We still put sections together about the fact that housing and home building and put them out week after week. And we don't have the advertising to support them, but it's what we've always done. So that's what we're always going to do. We had our marketing meeting yesterday for our different publications to the office in Sheldon and ended up moving a half a dozen of the different special tabs we used to do as the front section of our accent section. We'll still do the particular sections on holiday decorating or a section on holiday involvement one way or another, but rather than making it a tabloid, we'll put it into the regular paper, giving strength and size to our regular broadsheet pages and not having the expense of another press run, but still enjoying the revenue that we've always gotten off of that section. Many people tell us our pages are too large and too difficult to hold. Other complaints are the articles are overwritten, poorly edited, and time consuming. And candidly, numbers of papers are poorly designed and or poorly printed. But on the good side, we're the sunshine in the community. And I made this slide and I thought about the sunshine law and how important that is. But newspapers provide the important vitamin C that every community needs to have to grow and to exist. The very first one, the most important one, is consensus. The internet, with all the different people out there putting ideas out and sharing thoughts and sharing opinions, cannot create consensus, because every site you go to, the person running that particular blog or website has an entirely different opinion, and his opinion is seen by a few in the community, but they grab that opinion. Only the newspaper of all the media is able to put out an editorial or a solid, honest news article that tells what's going on and why it's going on and what needs to be done about it, and have the community as a whole, as a numerous group of people, grab a hold of that, and that's their consensus. And because they all have that consensus, they work together, visit with public leaders, do whatever is necessary to make sure that that actually happens. When newspapers disappear, it's going to be one of the hardest things for communities to find a way to replace. Newspapers bring continuity. I was in my office yesterday and there was a man in the front conference room looking at one of our bound editions, and I happened to know him. And I stopped by and I said, "Hi, how are you?" et cetera, et cetera. And for some reason, the conversation came around to the fact that he was now married 68 years. Now, he and I are the same age. And I said, "How could that be possible? I've only been married 59. And he said to me, "Wait a second." And he counted on his fingers and said, "Oh no, I've been married 59 years. Well, the story I tell you is because there he was in the office looking up something important in one of my back volumes, the continuity, the first history of the community, that's found in your local paper. And when you want to find out what we did and where we need to go, where do you go look for it? It's the newspaper. You can't do that in the radio station. Reach up and turn on the dial and say, "I want to hear that story I heard 4 days ago." It's not going to be there. Newspapers create a commitment in the community, and they bring credibility to the reporting that's being done. And finally, they create cooperation among the members of the community. You might want to think about, and by the way, on the left is one of our newspapers pages where we report what's happening in the community this week. The news of the accidents, the news of the robberies, the news of the people who were caught driving down the street drunk, what's happening in the different areas of the government, et cetera, et cetera. It's an important page and probably one of the most well-read pages we have in the paper. On the right, I'm telling you that you want to make sure that you have readers to see that page and to be aware of what's happening in the community for your own good and for the good of the people that make up the citizens group. So create a reader board. Invite and rotate a group of citizens to regularly meet and evaluate your newspaper. Our editor does it by bringing in about 12 different people. He gets a couple of names off the subscriber list that have not renewed. He gets a couple of people who are subscribers, and he picks 3 or 4 names out of the phone book at random. We invite them to meet at one of the local pizza places where we provide lunch for them. After lunch, he hands out copies of the last edition of the hometown paper, the one that he's interested in their response to. He gives one to every single person there and gives them a magic marker, a red magic marker. And he says, now go through the paper. And I want you to put X on every article that you find interesting, that you think is worthwhile to read, that you think is important to the community. And they went through it pretty quickly, marking the things they like, overlooking the things that they don't like, hand the papers in, and he's got a good idea right there of what he's doing right and what he's doing wrong. Then they go into a conversation about, do you have some other story ideas that I could use? Are there some things in the paper that we're not doing that we should do? And has a conversation with them. If you do this every couple of months, that's often enough. Even if you want to do it every 6 months, it's better than not doing it at all. But you need to stay in touch with the people in your town so that you have some idea what they want and desire in their hometown newspaper. A little humor here just for a moment. We think about all the people who are condemning us today, who are complaining today about the newspaper industry. Well, and what a name. Her name was Hazel Green Harold Spencer Cooper. That's a lot of names when you introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Hazel Green Harold Spencer Cooper. She was the editor of the Kentucky Mountaineer. She said, when you hear a man sneering at the local paper because it's not big, it's cheap, not cheap, and it's not newsy as the big city papers, you can safely bet he does not squander any of his wealth in assisting to make it better, and that generally the paper has done more for him than he has done for it. The man who cannot see the benefits arising from a local newspaper is about as much value to the town as a delinquent tax list. This was written back in 1924. So things haven't changed a lot in our industry. We still have more complaints than we have people slapping us on the back. I had a gal call me a couple of weeks ago about one of our papers in one of the small towns we serve and complained about the fact that we're not covering as many different sports teams as she would like. And in the conversation, she said to me, I don't subscribe to that paper, your hometown paper, and I don't subscribe to your regional paper, but I'm very disappointed about the coverage that you're providing. And I thought to myself, wow, no investment on your part, but you want more investment on my part. There are two types of stories that go into every paper, hard news and features. Hard news includes covering the city council. And the second, features, is writing about the kid in a wheelchair playing pee-wee basketball. We had the high school in Sibley, Iowa, one of the towns in which we do business, burned to the ground a number of years ago. And we had 4 full pages of photographs and news coverage in the newspaper that Saturday about the burning down of that high school. Also in that paper was a story about a little gas station owner. The gas station was little, not the owner. And he had found on his front door when he came to work one morning an abandoned dog. He took the dog in and named it Welfare. And once he had got the dog into his station and provided it some warmth and a place to lay down, it became obvious the dog was pregnant. Very soon, the dog had pups. And the gentleman, his name was Rod Galbraith, was very, very careful about how those dogs were distributed to people who wanted them. You had to prove to him that one of those pups, if you took it home, you were going to take care of it, love it, and grow it, and make sure it had a lengthy life. The story was printed under the title Welfare. 10 years later, you talk to people and you ask them about the 4 pages of fire coverage, they don't even remember it. But all of them still remember the story about welfare. Local readers want to read something they can use to start a conversation at the water cooler. That's why the police report is always well read in every single paper. And that's why we continue to publish that police report, even though sometimes it becomes an embarrassing situation to do so. I had the president of a bank come in and say to me, I need to talk to you. And I said, okay. And he said to me, I need to tell you that my mother was caught shoplifting at one of the local stores here in town, and I don't want you to put her name into your police report. I looked at him, I said, you know, a few years ago, I was very upset driving along the highway, made an illegal turn on the highway and caused another car to go in the ditch and crash. The next week, that story was in the police report. If I'm going to include in the police report dumb things that I've done, I can't leave out of the police report situations, including your mother. If I leave out anything at all, then people will think I'm leaving out the best of everything. And that doesn't make good local coverage. So let's stop here again and ask if there's some conversation we can get going. Obviously, you don't all agree with what I'm saying. If we are in a room together, you'd be raising your hands and asking me questions. And even though we're doing this by video, there should be a chance for us to share some more. Any questions?
Don't be shy. No, Peter, you must be covering all the bases.
Well, I hope we're holding it.
Peter, does your entire editorial team help with the editorials that are published in all the newspapers every week?
No, they don't. We have an editorial writer. I have to tell you the truth on this. An editorial writer who once worked for us, but moved to another state. He was a general editor when he was with us, moved to another state because his lady friend was there. But he was so good at what he does that he continues to be the source of all the finished editorials in the paper. However, we have an editorial board made up of the 4 members of the Wagner family and of 3 people within our editorial operation. And we have 17 in our combined newsrooms who are part of providing ideas for the editorial. And all of those people, those 7 people, get a chance to see that editorial when it's finished and before it's published, to comment and reflect on it, and sometimes to ask for changes.
All right, thanks.
Peter, not really a question, but a comment on your police report thing. A few years ago, I had to put my son in my jail docket, and probably about 6 months after that, a woman came in and said, my husband said I was crazy to come and ask you because you put your son's name in the jail docket, but I need you to keep my son's name out. What do you think? And I looked at her and I said, I think you're married to a very wise man.
I like that. Yeah, we can't be editorial when it comes to reporting on ourselves, unfortunately. Let's move on. Number 2, you got to be logical. Management has to realize they need to be logical. Newsprint, ink, and a credible staff and the distribution all cost money these days. That's why it's important for editors and publishers to regularly meet with current and potential subscribers and advertisers to have a personal knowledge of what is important to the community. We talked about that earlier. Many stories in today's paper are cliche loaded, they're boring, and they're nothing but coldly reported facts. Good reporting includes solid research, great insight, and heartfelt writing. It has to be logical. We want to reach younger readers, the Gen Ns, and some of those. And truthfully, that means we have to change some of the ways we do business. We have to write tighter, better written stories. We have to have more inviting page design. We have 3 page designers who do the entire papers and every single page of the papers. And every one we try to make sure that we're making them something that people want to pick up and look at. There have to be lots of additional points of entry in the stories. I'll pick up a paper, my own paper, and I'll start reading the story. I lose interest, drop halfway down, and there's a quote block or some other point of entry that brings me back in the story, and I start reading it again. Then I want to go back and read it from the top because of what am I missing? We have to do unique and exclusive stories, and we have to make our paper an element of fun, and there has to be immediate gratification. Reading it, I have to feel like, well, I didn't know that. That's great. I'm glad to know that. They're going to do that. I want to be there. That happened. Well, I wish I had been there. We have to make it something that is more than just cold facts. Sometimes shorter is better than longer. Not every story has to be long, and pertinent information can often be reported in a graphic. On the left, you see the page that we did on precious cargo. The state had come up with new laws on child seats for the cars. Well, we did that with a bunch of quote blocks, actually paragraph blocks, pointing back to the different aspects of the chair to make it something that is easy to read and to accept. To do it in a long story, it never would have been read. Also, I want you to remember, you don't have to run a 32-inch story just because your reporter spent 3 hours at a meeting. We don't have to justify his time if nothing actually happened at the meeting. Make friends with key local officials and with organizations. I don't mean the kind of friendship where you're going to hide something for them when something goes wrong. I mean the kind where they can trust you, know who you are, and where you can call them at home or on their cell phone to get the details and to have a better story because you knew who you could call, who you can trust, and who will talk to you. And most importantly, be accessible. Provide your after hours contact information, your cell phone number, the key sources, especially fire and law enforcement people, so that they can call you and say, hey, the elevator is burning down. You might want to be here. Or, hey, we just had a terrific accident that killed 17 people on the highway. Whatever it might be, get them to be sharing with you and calling you and not having to go see them a day later and saying, oh, I understand this happened. What was it all about? Our local dry cleaners had a fire 2 days ago. 12 midnight, the fire took place. The local police department called up one of my reporters. We had it on our website by about 12:30 with pictures. Cover major events before they take place. Build reader interest with historic and background photos. Feature useful, informative, and colorful graphics. Plan advertising sales to complement the editorial material. Well, your competition is coming out with a story of the week after about the annual so-and-so town hog roast, and maybe a picture of people standing around picking up their meat on the buffet table. You can come out with a wonderful full page or half page story about the fact that it's going to happen, help make it more eventful, and tell the story that gets people there so they can enjoy the event, not just read about the event. And you can probably get a half a page advertising from local businesses who are going to want to say, look at what you're here for the hog roast, stop by my hardware store and pick up whatever it is you're looking for. So there is an advantage making a difference between yourself and your competition by telling the stories many times before they happen rather than after they happen. This conference has got in its title the word circulation. So I wanted to make sure you understand circulation fact. You cannot sell many subscriptions into an area that don't chop your community. So I have papers that are located about 45 miles apart. And there are a couple of towns between those papers that shop both directions. But beyond that, I can't get circulation sold for my Shelter Mail Sun any closer to the Sioux Center News than I can Sioux Center News circulation sold beyond that spreading community for my Shelter Mail Sun. And so don't try. Figure out where you can sell your circulation and then concentrate on that area. Here's a circulation idea I wanted to share with you too. This is Ty Rushing. He's the managing editor of our Northwest Iowa Review. Ty's a fireball and a very good reporter, as well as our managing editor of all of our publications, but he is also the editor of the Mail Sun. Ty carries these with him, these cards, and they say simply 6 issues free. So when he's doing an interview or talking to somebody and say, well, I want to see the story. How do I get the story? Can you send me a paper? Ty says, well, this close to the deadline, I probably can't get you into the mailing list. You can buy it at one of the local stores. But here, send this in with the information of your name and address on the back, and I'll make sure that you get 6 free issues of the Mail Sun for the 6 weeks beyond the issue that you're talking about. And people do. And then we follow up with a mailing to them 6 weeks later. You sure want to continue, don't you? And they say, yes, I do. And it's a good way for us to constantly be sampling our paper to people who are aware that we exist, because they've had a visit from the paper's managing editor himself. What if COVID-19 persists? They said at the beginning to be over in the middle of the summer, and then they said to be over by fall. There are those that said to be over after Election Day. I think it's going to continue well into next spring. If COVID-19 persists, don't cut content and don't cut coverage and don't cut staff. Be the local authority and increase coverage of both the COVID situation in your community and the everyday news that's important to your community. And remember, everyday news starts with people who get together, do things with people. Our predecessors did very, very well with hometown papers that were reporting who had dinner in town with whom when they came to church on Sunday. Tell your newspaper's unique story. Tell it to your readers, tell it to your advertisers, tell it to the Kiwanis Club, tell it to Rotary Club, tell it wherever you can tell it. Make sure people understand your paper's connection to the community, the folks who own it, and how they're involved living in town and going to school in town and concerned about the town. Share your demographics, the kind of readers that you reach. The paper up in the northern Minnesota paper I talked about earlier, when I was putting it up there, when we first started years and years ago, that was a white collar town. Today it's a blue collar town. And it's because of a meatpacking plant that came to town that's attracted an entirely different demographic. Well, that's still a demographic that buys things. So tell your demographics. People need to know who you're reaching and how you're reaching them and what you're doing to reach them. Use special marketing services and use those marketing services not only to reach the people, but sell those services to the people themselves. Help them be successful. Tell them about the selection of publications reserved. Tell them about any broadcast or digital opportunities you offer. Tell them your personal knowledge of the business. Make sure they understand that you have a foot in this because you grew up in it, or because you were part of a group that bought it because you wanted to see the paper continue. And share with them ways the paper can help build revenue for their business, and share with them rates and deadlines and distribution if you're on the advertising side. Get out there. All these things are things about yourself that you're keeping to yourself, and which your subscribers and your advertisers need to know. Okay, this is another chance for questions. We've only got one more area to go into, so let's open it up one more time, Lane, and see if there's anything somebody wants to say. Anybody out there?
We'll give the timid folks a chance to chime in at the end, Peter, if we have time.
All right, well, we'll keep moving on then. Our local Hy-Vee store in Sheldon is one of the key advertising organizations that we have. JJ is the store director, a nice young man. I enjoy working with him. And JJ came in to see me one day at one of our Talk to Us Tuesday sessions. At our paper, we invite different community and business leaders to come into our conference room on a Tuesday for the noon hour, and we provide lunch. We get Subways, or we get some kind of hot dishes from the local restaurant, so that we can sit around, the editor, the family, and the guests, and talk to them. What do you see about your business that we should know about? And what do you see about us that you think we should change? Or what do you see about us that you'd like to see changed? And JJ came in and he said to me, Hy-Vee established the gas card rebate program simply to collect email addresses. Most of you have gasoline stations in your market now that have a tie to a grocery store, where when you buy at the grocery store, you get credit toward gas. He said they were out to collect email addresses, but top corporate management doesn't see Hy-Vee able to depend on the internet for total advertising for another dozen years. Now, about a year after he came and had this conversation with me, Hy-Vee did just that. They quit doing inserting in all papers in Iowa, cut back on all display advertising in all papers in Iowa, and they did so for a period of 7 weeks. Instead, they sent out emails and they sent out printed material, direct mailed it to customers on a mass mailing basis. And then after 7 weeks, they came running in the door and said, help, we're not doing the business we used to do with our weekly ad in the paper. We've got to get those back in again. Can you insert it beginning next week? And I said, sure. So the fact of the matter is, we are able to deliver for them, and no other single media, including direct mail or website, for Hy-Vee was able to reach and provide the results provided by the local printed publication. Pulse Research last spring put this out. They said, what about websites? Local newspaper websites, 45.4% of the audience goes to the local newspaper website. The only one that came in higher locally was the TV station, and that's not even local. Mine are located almost 70 miles away from me to the east and to the west. National broadcasting, 62%, local radio, 17%, Facebook, 21.2%. So our websites are still doing well, but the fact of the matter is, there is a glitch there too. I wanted to show you this. This is Prairie Patch. We did this almost 15 years ago. We were way ahead of our time. Prairie Patch was an attempt on our part to provide a local shopping catalog for people who got our paper. And we solicited and sold ad space in it to a number of different advertisers in our community, just in the community of Sheldon, with the idea that you could call our Watts number, order the items that you wanted. We grouped them all together, boxed them up, and when our delivery trucks were out taking papers around to the different communities, they dropped the boxes of items out. So it was a one call for all type package. And we got marvelous response from the advertisers, but very little response from the readers. So I think, though, the time for it is coming back again. I was on a webinar with a number of newspapers from another area this past week, and one of the ladies that was on the webinar said that this is exactly what she's going to do, is put together a catalog for Christmas, pointing out that with COVID and how impossible it is right now to go into the big city market stores and not have to worry about somebody in there being sick, that the local stores can advertise X number of items. You can call the store, they'll be all boxed up, and when you drive up out front, they'll bring the items out for you, and you don't have to worry about COVID. Or if you go in the local store, you're going to be less likely to run into somebody in that smaller operation with more distancing than if you're in a JCPenney or a Macy's somewhere. And I think to myself, or I thought to myself at least, maybe this is something, this Prairie Patch idea is something that we need to bring back once again. Meanwhile, Facebook has reported average revenue of $7.05 per user, which doesn't sound like much, but worldwide, that's the figure. Here in the States, it's $36.49. That's more than $18 billion in ad revenue and a net income of more than $5 billion in 1 quarter. In 1 quarter, Facebook now controls 77% of all social network advertising. This is 2 days old, created by Alan Fisco, the president of the Seattle Times, who put out an 8-page tabloid section denouncing and telling the real story about Facebook last week. And if you think Instagram is the alternative, it's not. It was purchased by Facebook in 2012. Interestingly, if you are an advertiser on Facebook and Instagram, you can switch between the two. In 2016, Facebook said that advertising on both platforms goes together like peanut butter and jelly. Many of us think Facebook is free, but it isn't. In exchange for using Facebook, Facebook users give up valuable personal data, and that data is then used to generate mailing lists so that they can sell them to people who are selling products. Facebook uses this data to sell targeted advertising, resulting in the $18 billion of quarterly revenue that was noted earlier. talking to a friend the other day. He said he was online asking about Bermuda vacations, just doing some research on Bermuda vacations. And as quickly as he got offline, he got emails from people offering to sell him Bermuda vacations. The more time that our readers spend on Facebook means the more advertising revenue for Facebook. It also means the less dollars for us, because that's money that's not being spent locally. It also means that the platform collects more data, and more data means that they have more people to target, which means higher advertising rates and revenue for them. The circle goes on and on. But I love this. I did not originate this. One of my printing customers over in Nebraska has this on his internet and has it on his emails. He says, by saying, I don't need newspapers, I've got the internet. It's like saying, I don't need farmers because I've got supermarkets. All those people, Google particularly, that are putting all those news stories out, get them somewhere, and they don't pay for them. And the somewhere they get them is us. I want to take a second to tell you that there are 2 monthly mailers that I send out on web or on internet. One is called Get Real, and it's a monthly look at the situation that newspapers are in today and what the future looks like. The other is called Paper Dollars, and it's a publishing revenue idea that might be unique and different for your market. If you are interested in either of those, you might be getting them through your press association, and that's terrific. If you're not, email me at pww@iowainformation.com, and I'll make sure that you get on the mass mailing list for those. Push the wrong buttons here. I'm going to skip these questions and keep going on because we'll do that at the end. I want to talk about Lively. The future of newspapers and shoppers depends on a lively look with tight editing, creative headlines, multiple points of entry to every story longer than 3 inches, lots of photos, brilliant color, and exciting artistic layout. I've been showing you covers from my publications as we've gone along, trying to give you some idea of what I consider to be lively, exciting, artistic layout. Here are 2 of my papers. The Saturday Review, my regional paper. The one on the left, that's the 5,400 circulation paper. And my Sheldon Mail Sun, my hometown paper, in where our offices are. And that one's at about 1,200. We're not real strong with that. That paper continues to go down, even though it's an extremely good paper. I have got to do some effort to boost the circulation on that one because my hometown Review is outdoing my hometown Sheldon Mail Sun. But our design department spends a lot of time trying to make a look that pulls you into the articles and makes you feel you're part of something that's alive and that's interesting. Photographs are visual and often emotional. Look at the one on the left. Good photographs usually attract readers into the story. When publishing photos, use only your very best images. You take lots of pictures just because you took the picture. If it's not any good, don't put it in the paper. One bad picture destroys all the good ones. Size does matter. Make your photos purposeful and historical, centered on people and not just on landscapes. Don't suffer from light fright. Use your flash. Use additional lighting that you carry with you. Shoot lots and use only the best and make them big and make them beautiful. Here are some photos that I think are particularly excellent. This photo tells a story all by itself. Here's a man in an area that's flooded, standing knee deep in the floodwater, carrying what to him at that moment is the most precious cargo he could possibly take out of his building, his cat. It tells a story all by itself. It doesn't even need a cut line. This picture is also, I think, delightful. It's taken at the county fair. And what I like about it is the little boy is busy sweeping it up and trying to get things put together there in the barn where the cows are being kept. But one of the exhibitors is sound asleep and probably has shown earlier that day and has taken care of and washed and brushed down his cows, and he's just simply tired. But the photo is, like they often say, better than 1,000 words. We have a thing in Iowa called RAGBRAI, Right Across Iowa. And every year, 20,000 bicyclists ride across Iowa down a common route. We didn't do it this year because of COVID. This is the last time those bicyclists came through our city. And I think it's an amazing picture when you look and see the masses of people in that first wave alone. And that's just the first wave. There are going to be miles and miles of riders coming along behind them. It's the kind of picture that not only draws a reader into the paper, but it also is one that records history. This fire picture is particularly important to me. I think it's very graphic, but it also is the picture of our printing plant burning to the ground. Since then, we have built a brand new one. Let's talk about photos as content. The bigger the photo, the more likely the reader is to read the story. 90% of readers enter the page through large photos, artwork, graphic, or headlines. And any story supported with a visual element is 3 times more likely to be read. So they are important. They do make a difference. Finally, I'm almost to the end here. Some quick design ideas. When we opened the brand new junior high school, we did a actual virtual tour in the paper showing one picture from each of the different kinds of classrooms and telling about that classroom and also why that classroom was designed the way it was. You'll also see pictures of the floor space of that particular room and how it was the architect's drawings in each one. This was printed as 2 full pages in our Sheldon Mail Sun. Sometimes you can put an awful lot of information on a page and make it something that's going to be read and followed by breaking it up. This is our football preview section. You can see there's the schedule, looking ahead, some details about what might be happening with the team. It's possible wins and it's possible loses. It's 2000 re-record, looking back, pictures of some of the gals who make up the cheerleaders, the coach, the assistant coaches, some of the key players. There's a lot of information on that page, including the full roster, without making it paragraph style, thereby making it a lot more readable and a lot more accessible. One of the fun things we did one year for Easter is we asked different members of the people in our actual building, staff members, questions about their favorite Easter candy and published it as a page that looked like that. We also quite often will do pages where we'll have a photograph and then a listing along one side of what's important in that photograph, drawing lines of the different things that are being discussed and described in the paragraph that's on the right of the illustration. And finally, this was when they built the new highway through our area, and we actually had a map we put together showing where the new highway was going to go and some of the things that would happen on that highway as it was put together. On the small screen, obviously you're not going to see them as well as you should, but as you were told, we will provide you with this full program that you can open up and look at in your own computer at your leisure. Be varied. Being a good newspaper is a lot of little things. Rewrite news releases. Don't use them the way they come. Call to get a quote or two from the source that makes it different than the competitors. Expand your circle. Get involved. Read your classified ads. You'll find great stories sometimes buried within your classified ads. Go early and stay late covering the meetings. The best stories that come out of meetings are the things you hear as the people sit around and talk before the meeting and after the meeting. And remember, be informative, personal, educational, full of heart, and balanced. And at that point, we finished my presentation so we can go to questions, if there's time.
Yes, plenty of time.
Peter, of all that quality news that you print in your papers, how much of it do you allow to be distributed free for anybody on the internet, or is it all behind the paywall?
We haven't created a paywall on our website. I have a paper in this 4-county area that put a full page ad out about 2 years ago. And it said, because of the fact that our circulation is declining drastically, we are no longer going to put our paper on the internet. And I just never have felt that's something I want to do. I want people to subscribe and pick up the real paper. And I want to be able to say to folks, I know I've got readers because this is the number that are being purchased. We do put on our website teasers. If there's a fire, we're going to tell you that there's a fire and where it's at, and perhaps how it got started. But you're going to have to pick up the paper on Wednesday if it's a midweek paper, or on Saturday if it's the review, and you're going to have to get the details there. Other questions?
Peter, is there
Um,
anything you've learned in the pandemic that has turned out to be a positive? Something that you didn't, you may not necessarily have wanted to do, but when you did it, it turned out to be a good thing. I'm always interested in hearing, like we at the Press Association have primarily gone from a work from home scenario, and it frightened me to death when we decided to do it, but it's turned out to be a very manageable change for us. So I'm just curious if there's anything that has sprung forth from the pandemic that you've co-opted into an opportunity.
I think the number one lesson we learned from the pandemic is that we can override almost any problem and still succeed. Like you, we had a lot of people, salespeople particularly, who want to work at home. And we had a few writers working at home. At one point, we had 7 people in our building who all were under quarantine and all had the COVID. And it caused us some grief for a little while. But we can't do design at home. So you can see our design center is still pretty lively occupied every single day. And we can't seem to do as good a job creating the news for the paper when we're working out of separate locations, because you haven't got that chattering the conversation that says, oh, did you hear? Or what about? Or hey, here's an idea we can add to the story. And so overall, I don't think we like working from home. The only department that seems to think they can is our advertising sales department. And because this is a truthful time together, our sales are down. I'm not for it. I don't think that you can do telephones and emails and sell advertising as well as you can when you walk in the door and you say to somebody, hi, I've got this great idea for you. This is how it's going to work. This is what I'm going to do. And all I need from you is this. And I'm concerned about it. And I'm trying to work to get it turned around at the operation.
Are there other questions for Peter? Going once, going twice. Okay, Peter, thank you very much. Peter is going to hang around. Obviously, he has the second session tomorrow. Peter, well, let me first say that, and he's also expressed an interest to sit in on the roundtable that's coming up shortly, as well as the Hot Ideas session in the morning. So you will have opportunity to speak to Peter or interact with him either by chat or directly through Zoom. Peter, do you want to give a brief preview of what you're going to cover tomorrow, so we'll get people to